decade of democratizing the very best financial intelligence and building this kind of super community of finance, including the super platform of finance. And to celebrate, we're throwing a virtual party on September 27th at 12 p.m. and you are on the guest list. It's free to join, so don't miss out. If you're not a member, you can sign up at realvision.com/free. We've also got a trade ideas competition where you can flex your market smarts, plus some exclusive limited birthday merch and much more planned for September. It's going to be a lot of fun. So sign up, realvision.com/free, and we'll see you at the party, September 27th at 12 p.m. That's realvision.com/free.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us again, guys, for another episode of REKT Vision. OSF is currently on a flight to Singapore right now. He's going out there for Token 2049. So luckily, we have Sergio Silva come in to replace OSF. I think we should have you on more often. Normally, we see the market absolutely tanking on a Friday afternoon, and me and Ovi basically talk about how depressed we are. You've come on, and looks like we're about to break through 60K again. So thanks for coming on. How are you doing today?
Hey man, I'm happy to see that there's a coincidence there. Obviously, correlation is not causation, but for me, actually, every single trip that I've taken this year has seen the market just collapse. I actually put out a chart a few weeks back.
Really?
And I'm flying to Singapore on Monday, so yeah, let's not count our chickens before they're home to roost. But yeah, it's really weird. It's like to be precision sell-offs on every single trip.
I think when you came last time, it sort of just before you came on, and then we kind of rallied back. So I don't know. You're a mixed bag so far, but maybe you're lucky.
We'll see with the trip. So I was supposed to travel to Denmark a couple of weeks ago. I didn't, but then it sold off that day. So it's something. There's something there. We'll see if it sells off on Monday. We'll know. But happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome to have you come back. Just before we start, wanted to mention again, it's Real Vision's birthday this month. They're turning 10. To mark the occasion, they're offering some discounts on membership. Just head over to realvision.com/birthday, and you can use the code BDAY10. That's all caps, BDAY10, to get a discount on membership. All right, let's get into things. It's obviously, like I said, it's been a bit of a bounce. I think last week when we were live on this show, Bitcoin was just hanging out just above kind of 55K, and everything was looking a little bit precarious again. Now we're looking back up towards 60K. There's been quite a lot that's happened in macro this week, as is kind of to be expected in September. We had CPI come in, which kind of came in around about expectations. But today and yesterday, we've seen gold really rally because it looks like rate cut expectations for next week are now starting to price in 50 bips again. I think it's like a 40% chance of a 50 bip rate cut. And generally things have been rallying, including Bitcoin itself. How are you feeling about the market overall at the moment, Sergio?
Yeah, no, I think, last time I was here and obviously just watching the Real Vision content over the summer, we were really expecting a chop through this, through this period between illiquidity, no real catalyst, and then just the expectation of what's going to happen with Fed policy in the fall. I don't think, some people were calling for July cuts. I don't think that was consensus at all. So now it's really just a matter of, is it 25, is it 50? And do people get scared if it's 50? Because, what do they know that we don't know? But just talking to, friends and other investors, I think that everybody is pretty comfortable with, either 25 or 50. Obviously, 50 will be a little bit more fireworks. And we can definitely continue to see the market kind of like front run that. But, things are still okay. It's just more a matter of normalizing policy rather than stimulating an economy, which, sometimes you get people that say, well, the first 50 basis points of a cut usually precede a recession, but that's just usually where normalizing policy in a different manner. So yeah, I'm excited. I think it's going to be a good end of the year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think this is an emergency rate cut. by any means, but it does. I mean, we are really quite far away from where inflation is coming in. I think that was the lowest figure for about 3 years for CPI, which kind of tells you rates at 5.5% when inflation's heading back towards 2 just doesn't seem to make sense. I put this up here because it caused a little bit of a debate about whether we've actually hit the first higher low in Bitcoin. I think the daily, it depends if you count the wick or not. On the 4-hour, it does feel as though maybe we are starting to break out of that long channel, like you said, we've been in all throughout the summer. To be honest, we've been chopping for 6 months here, right? Bitcoin was at 60K in February. So it's really nearly 7 months. And I think, I mean, I've been saying for a few weeks that second week of October, I reckon before the elections, we'd start to see a bit more of a rally. It does feel as though we're starting to get a bit more clarity, at least on the rate cut moves. Or definitely will by next week, because I think he'll probably give a little bit of forward guidance about what he's going to do for the rest of the year. If it's 25 bips, I think he'll give a lot of forward guidance. If it's 50, maybe it'll be a bit more like wait and see. But I think the market just likes clarity around this sort of stuff. And we had that left curve translated cycle. And now heading into maybe the end of the election, I think we ran in both scenarios in the election. I think Trump's more positive, but I do think that we could end up with a pretty positive Q4. What do you think? Do you think this is a higher low, or do you think this is the reversal?
I saw you tweet that, and I was like, man, that's some good hopium. I think it's to your point, right? Like, you can always, and we both spend a lot of time on trading desks. You can always put a chart out to really justify your bias, and so yeah, to me, it doesn't look like a higher low, but also don't think it makes that much of a difference. So things are really changing, and you can't see that in the chart, right? To your point, not only the election will bring in one of two populists. At the end of the day, both Trump and Harris are different brands of populism, but they're both populist, and that will bring about a lot of liquidity, I think. And then just whatever the Fed decides to do, they say they're not political, but there's no way the party that is now in control is not really trying to work behind the scenes to make sure that the economic front, which is where Kamala really is like the underdog, at least looks better going into the election in November. So definitely see much more supportive policies or just announcements when it comes to the economy. And yeah, I think both of them are just going to bring a lot of liquidity, and you can't see that in a chart or in a wick, or like it tells a different story.
Yeah, I think up until about August, there was a very, very high correlation between the Bitcoin price and the chance of Donald Trump getting in. And that's really broken down. Like this week, after the debate, Kamala kind of is very, very slightly ahead, or it's 50-50 odds, right? And before that, I think Trump, at least in the prediction markets, had about an 8-point lead. And Bitcoin's still rallying. And I really thought there was a very high correlation. It does feel like maybe we're just hoping for a resolution either way. Kamala's definitely tried to be a little bit more softer, it seems, in crypto, or like is making indications that she'll be a little bit softer in terms of policy. But yeah, it feels like the market doesn't really, or at least the Bitcoin market is less correlated to that right now. The other two correlations I think to look at is the ones we have up right now, which is the correlation to the NASDAQ and to gold. Gold hit an all-time high again this week. Boomers laughing at us at the moment. All-time high after all-time high this year, whereas Bitcoin's still hanging out around over 20% lower than its all-time high. We're more correlated with the NASDAQ, which also is seemingly below its all-time high. But do you think this is more just technicals? Do you think this is just the sell-off from all these different supply pockets? Do you think we've kind of lost that correlation to gold?
So it's a couple of things for me. First, to your point about Bitcoin and Trump odds, I think Bitcoin has really separated itself from the rest of crypto in the sense that, now with the ETF, which I think is the best consumer product crypto has ever put out, the Bitcoin ETF. Like that, I think whatever, Warren or whoever is going to be influential in a potential Harris administration, when they come for crypto, I don't think they're going to come for Bitcoin. They're going to come for the alt L1s, all the infrastructure stuff that, you could make an argument could have better guardrails for investors. And so I think Bitcoin continues to be that kind of like, digital asset for the boomers, the one that they can easily add to their portfolio, and it will continue to separate. Does that reflect something of like Bitcoin dominance? I don't know, because, we're going to have a lot new tokens created and those will accrue some value. But I do think Bitcoin is really starting to disconnect from the rest of crypto. As for the other correlations, I mean, gold, I just see the price of gold and it just gives me so much heartburn because I sold the gold that I had to buy NFTs in March of 21 and I looked
Oh
like
God.
in 3 months. And then I'm like, but listen, it's just, your traditional trade going into the macroeconomic environment that we're going into. I think also, obviously, folks, I don't know, I think gold is such a boomer trade and like there's just more boomers every day, right? If you think about it, people are getting older, they tend to get more conservative in their portfolios, they tend to rotate out of stocks that have done so well over the last, call it 30 years, and really starting to diversify as they start, retiring, and some of the stuff that Ralph talked about with the retirement crisis coming on and the like. I think that's why gold will also kind of like have a new range for the next 15 to 20 years. But I don't think it takes anything away from Bitcoin itself. Now, the rest of crypto, we can spend a lot of time talking about, but I do think Bitcoin it's its own animal at this point in time and will be going forward.
Yeah, I was thinking myself, just like, I think the inflation trade's back on. Like all these assets, I'm bullish on gold because I'm bullish on anything. I think global rates are going basically back to all-time lows or close to all-time lows in most of the major economies now. I think this debt is just completely unsustainable. I think if you saw today, the daily debt now in the US, the daily interest payment is $3 billion a day that they're now paying. So it's over $1 trillion being added just in interest payments, which is just absolutely wild. I just feel as though rates are going to have to come down across the board, particularly where inflation is. And you can start looking at some of these inflation trades like Bitcoin. It's tough to paint a bullish picture for gold and not for Bitcoin. I just think you've had this, and Bitcoin still had a good year, but it's been kind of down in the dumps. I think just so much supply came out from various of the different liquidations, basically from last cycle. Like all the CXs and BlockFi and Celsius. Like there was just a lot
Germany.
of.
Last time I was here was Germany. We were talking about the Germany sales.
Yeah, Germany. Yeah, so like it's come from all these different places, and now that's kind of in the rearview mirror. I do think those same sort of things that are pushing gold to an all-time high will do the same. I was looking at loads of different things though, because the luxury market's also been absolutely hammered. I don't know if you've seen that, but things like watches, wine, they've all been hammered because China's real estate bubble is like completely unwinding, and that was like the bid for a long time. But I quite like those now. Like they're down like 30-40%. And I think they're good inflation trades as well. But I was looking at those this week.
I think those are like similar to NFTs, just a much lower moving markets, right? Just because of the natural inefficiencies in them. But I do think they're going to be a good trade. I probably would just wait for them to really bottom out. And I think this, I think real estate here in the States is very, very interesting. I don't know if you've been tracking that from Europe, but we had a gigantic run up in values, mostly driven by people buying apartments and houses to rent, either just traditional, like landlording and or Airbnb. And I think watching the Airbnb market obviously weaken because people are traveling a lot less than when they had that time to work from home or work remotely, and just things a little bit softer than they were a couple of years ago. That's really putting pressure on, not yet on prices. There's not a lot of transactions because sellers are holding out. There's a lot of supply coming, and you see some of the states that were very, very much the same states from back in the last crisis, Florida, Arizona, Texas, a lot like that. Look at the Dallas market because I love that city. I want to move there one day. And I mean, inventory is up like 15-20% year on year, which is just really, really a sign of things to come. And so for me, real estate, watches, all that stuff are on a very similar cycle, but much more slow moving.
Yeah. There's obviously like more local supply demand imbalances you need to be aware of in those sort of markets. I completely agree. I was looking at those trades. I remember back in 2020 when I felt like obviously there was going to be a big easing sort of cycle. I don't think we're heading straight to QE, but it does feel as though those trades, I think, might outperform even here. But yeah, I think Bitcoin has kind of separated away from the rest. I think that's probably takes us into the next sector, which is what has been going really on in ETH again, which is ETH dominance. ETH dominance hitting a, again, 3.5-year low. Obviously, it's going into 2049. I think Vitalik is talking at 2049. There seems to be a lot of debate again just around this fee split between L1s and L2s. The L2s are taking a disproportionate amount of the value away from the L1 and users, and just a lot of questions about the future of it. We've kind of gone back and forth on this one a little bit, but do you have any? I know you've been in the ETH streets a long time, so do you have any views on the future of ETH here?
Yeah, so I think it was at the Real Vision Insider Pro meetup that we had here in New York a few months ago, and Kevin Kelly and I were talking about ETH. I just don't think it's its cycle. As far as, obviously these are very reflexive assets, and the story, the narrative is not there for ETH. For me, the first time I came across ETH, somebody compared it to oil. And obviously we use, petroleum products every single day, and the demand for petroleum just continues to go up, mostly through time. Yet the price of oil varies wildly year on year. And that's the way I think of ETH here. The narrative is not there, to your point, L1 versus L2, kind of fee split. There's not a lot of really economic activity on the chain right now. NFTs were that, but we don't have a lot of NFT volume right now. So what else do you have left? You have tokenization products or projects that are, RWA, that are all the rage on the institutional side. I mean, you go on LinkedIn and everybody's now an RWA or an AI expert, which is just really, really funny. But anyways, regardless, that's where the investment's going, but there's not a lot of activity. So there's not a lot of demand for it. There's not a lot of just, good narratives. So yeah, I don't think it's its cycle. And I think, why bet on a medium moving horse when there's faster horses out there to go around? And so that's, unfortunately, as much as I love Ether, I think it's not, it's just not its cycle.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. It's weird because I just think the reason for using ETH, because of the way the L2s are running, is increasingly about stable coins on the L2s rather than actually using ETH as a currency. Solana is really being used, I feel more as a currency, whereas ETH is collateral for DeFi. And these L2s don't even have to use ETH as the gas token. So I feel as though, and I've said this before, but I kind of like Coinbase stock as my ETH trade. I think Base could be really if you're bullish on ETH, you're generally bullish on Base, and Base, being able to onboard consumers, being able to onboard institutions, and a lot of stuff happening there. And they are also winning a disproportionate amount of the institutional business at the moment. So it's not that I don't like the ETH ecosystem. I'm just not sure if ETH is the asset that you really even play for that now. And that's kind of part of the architecture. But there's been some talk about maybe changing some of the rollups. I saw based rollups as a theme that's starting to gain some traction, which maybe Vitalik will talk about next week. There definitely seems to be a bit of an internal fight at the moment between the L1 and the L2. I think the interesting one that I saw this week, though, is that Solana has also kind of underperformed. And that's, although it's back up to 136 versus Bitcoin and versus a lot of the alt L1s, namely things like Sui, Near, Ton, I think even ICP, those coins are up 25%. Or 20% roughly, I would say, this week, particularly Sui, and Solana's kind of up about 3 or 4%. I don't know if you have any views on Solana, because I think it's been a great trade, but there's been a lot of and it's hit an all-time high in active addresses this week. So yeah, which we put up here, that's the all-time high for any blockchain ever. But you've got some unlocks happening in Q1, which you've started to see some comment about even today. I think FTX actually unstaked some of their Solana, and you got about 2 to 3% of the total Solana supply coming out in unlocks in Q1. And I'm just wondering if that's still the trade. I don't know if you have a strong view on it.
I'm a lot more neutral on Solana here for a couple of reasons. One, again, narratives, right? Those unlocks, people, something's gonna get picked up on the crypto native media and it's gonna be repeated often, and it's gonna put a lid. The second thing, though, is just it lost its momentum. I mean, to your point, it's been a great trade. It was what, $25 a year ago, something like that. and it went up to what, 200 and something. So 6, 7, 8x for people that caught it. I think once that type of trade runs out of juice, especially given how hard the corrections are in crypto, people will probably take into look some money off the table, learn their lesson. And until you get kind of like the start of an actual next run, I think people were just, I don't know, like PayPal USD is offering something like 15% on very traditional, normal, low risk DeFi on Solana. Like I actually park some of my former Solana holdings into, some of those DeFi products and just waiting things out to see, what happens with the summer, what happens with the election, what happens with, any of the other things that we had been expecting. But it was a great trade and take some money off the table. And I think until we get the new narrative, which whatever that might be, I don't know. And I'm hoping that next week at Breakpoint, we'll get kind of like a clear indication of what's going to take the baton. Obviously, the expectation of Fire Dancer was, a lot bigger, I would say, in February and March than it is today. I haven't heard the word Fire Dancer over the last 2 weeks.
Really?
Yeah. And I was just at the Solana Foundation office here in New York 2 nights ago for a pre-Breakpoint meeting, and there's a lot of people. So it does feel like that story might have gone ahead of itself. And we'll see. I mean, I'm looking forward to the keynotes. I think it's gonna be pretty cool. There's a lot of products that are launching, so hopefully Solana catches kind of fire again post Breakpoint. But yeah, so more neutral than not. Definitely still more bullish than on Ether. As much as every time I say that, it like something inside my heart breaks.
I know it kills me a little bit too, but you feel like your ex-girlfriend, right?
Yeah. Tell me about it. Anyway, what's next?
No, I think I think there are still some bullish things happening in Solana. Obviously, like they've done an incredible job at pushing new tech. I think Mert, even who's one of the core Solana devs, said there's going to be 5 major announcements even this month. I think most people are expecting something around finance, but if that gets delayed, who knows? But 5 other ones would also be very, very big. They ship products, whereas ETH, it always feels like you're waiting like 3 years for the next upgrade or whatever it's going to be, by design as well. But there's always something to grab the narrative, at least with Solana. But I think the main thing that's changed here is just that although users have gone up, obviously meme coin trading, which dominated the first half of this cycle and made Solana just look incredible, has slightly gone down, or at least moved to other chains as well, like Tron and BNB have had an all right shot at pushing coins, at least in the last month or two. And then secondly, it's this sort of stuff. Like, I don't even know if doesn't even seem that big in terms of an unlock, right? Like, I think it's something like 2 billion worth that's going to be unlocked, 2 to 3 billion in Q1, which is okay. It's big, but it's more it's just a narrative, and you'll see it on the timeline a lot. Like, oh my God, everyone's going to be dumping on you, that sort of stuff. Solana, I think, inflates at like 6 to 7% a year. So versus that, it's also very, very small, but it's a narrative thing. And I think people who are in crypto realize that sometimes it's just a narrative. A narrative is all you need. Like Vitalik's getting shouted at for selling 100 grand worth of ETH at the moment. He's got 600 million. That's the thing that scares me.
Yeah. It's going to get picked up and people run articles and then just, I mean, I've seen it. I've seen kind of even unintentional misinformation where people just, for example, I remember there was that, Apple had its NFC chip announcement that you can now pay with the NFC in the iPhones. And then the guy from Circle was like, oh, well, people will be able to use USDC with this. That's all he said. Somebody picked it up as Apple announced this partnership with Circle, and it ran like crazy on like LinkedIn and like all these people writing about like Apple and Circle having a partnership. And you're like, what? No. Same thing with the Trump thing. Last week, somebody posted that Trump and Aave were teaming up. And it's like, no, Trump's team is forking Aave like every other DeFi protocol has to launch their thing. So yeah, narrative, I think, is probably the biggest factor, especially in a quiet market when it comes to just developments and just improvement, new products, and so on. To your point about meme coins, I mean, I know you guys do pretty well in those. I'm not as good as you guys are, but it just feels very extractive, right? The teams making, even if it's just $1 million, if you have 100 teams making $1 million from a coin, that's 100 million of liquidity that's just going out the window. And I do think that reminded me a lot of like the late NFT days where people were just extracting value left and right, and that kind of like marked the top for a while for
Yeah.
each of the tokens themselves.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's become a bit more PvP. I think what you just said there before is basically what I'm worried about. For Solana to really get over, like, let's say inflation plus unlocks, you've got to have people coming in and really using it. And people go like, oh my God, this is the best form of internet money out there, right? But I'm just not too sure. Like search trends for crypto are touching the lows of the year again. Coinbase is back down to 500 on the App Store when it was in the top 100 a few months ago. Like, I'm not too sure if we've got another shot this year of getting in, hundreds of thousands of people again. So
I agree. I don't think so. And people are honestly, like, you see it on the streets here in New York. Last night it was Thursday. The bars are lively but half empty. Restaurants are lively but half empty. And you talk to people, and they're like, literally, the comment that I get all the time is nobody has any money. And so, at the end of the day, right, like, people are not going to be buying Solana or Dogecoin or whatever it is if they don't really have money to socialize with. For a place like this, it's more of a priority than adding to their crypto portfolio. And we hear it over and over. It's been a long time that people just say it's just nobody has money.
yeah, it's an interesting point because a lot of people have talked about the weakness in the US consumer just because of inflation, like which is like an interesting mix. Like if you own assets, you're probably not doing terribly, but the US consumer data has not been as strong for a while. But yeah, I just think that people probably have just been a little bit burnt for the last 3 months, and that just takes time. You can't just get them back in December. The water's warm. When I think it just takes a little bit more time. So that's what makes me think that these sort of narratives, which may not even be that big in a bull market, they become louder in a bear market. We'll maybe go on to what has been strong this week, which has kind of been that rotation that I touched upon. So a lot of L1s having a strong period, which aren't Solana, which aren't ETH. If you look at the dominance charts for pretty much every other alt L1, so if we go down here, like TON's up 23%, even Cardano's up 15%, BNB up 13%. BNB's had a good cycle, but it's just interesting to see Solana really underperform the majority of these. I think the one that had the strongest week, which has been having probably the strongest month so far, has been SUI, which broke a dollar. I think with a lot of these, it's difficult because you get under the hood and there's not a ton happening. Like there's growth, but it's not like tons of meme coin trading's happening there. It's not like huge amount of DeFi is moving there. SUI's had a growth in its DeFi, but it's more just looking for the next trade, it feels like. So I don't know if these are like 10x plays. I don't know if it's like buying Solana last year at 20, where it can go all the way up to 200. But it does feel like there's a rotation here, and people are wary of that Solana narrative being a little less strong and looking for alternatives. Have you looked at any of these?
I think that you just nailed it in the head, right? That comment, right? Like people rotating out of the Solana trade into what could be the next trade. I don't really think it's very fundamental. To your point, right? You and I, we spent probably 23 hours a day on crypto Twitter, and surrounded by crypto people. The only time, and I'm not going to mention which chain just to kind of not not get any trouble from the others, but my former colleagues at Fireblocks, one of these chains is really, really penetrating Asia, and it's not something that I would have picked up sitting here in New York or you sitting in Europe. But still, I can't name one NFT collection or one meme coin or one thought leader in any of these chains. Like, I know Mo from Aptos because obviously he's got a trajectory in the space, but I know Raul's involved with Sui. But those are people that are tangential to the rest of my life, and not really everybody knows Vitalik, Rash, and like all these other people that are part of the main chains. So yeah, I don't know, man. I think it's probably just liquid funds looking for the next Solana-like move and positioning, for if we do get a bull market, yes, these are gonna probably outperform just from the nature of, how more risk they carry. For me, I think last time I was here, we spoke about rather just sleep nice with Ether, Bitcoin, and Solana, and hopefully that 4x's And if I leave a 6x on the table, but I don't risk a down 80%, I am much happier with that than trying to figure out why my bag of alt ones is down 42% in a week. So for me, that's how I position myself. But you could definitely see that rotation just playing out.
So out of those four, let's include Sui, let's say. What do you think is the best risk reward out of Bitcoin, ETH, Solana, and Sui here?
So like risk adjusted returns, I think Bitcoin. Definitely Bitcoin.
That's what I feel as well. I feel like Bitcoin, I almost feel like because for a lot of those OL ones, and I'll let you finish, but I just feel as though they're also counting on users, and that's kind of why Solana, I think, is under threat. But yeah, maybe you explain why.
Yeah, no, I just think, again, right, Bitcoin has almost of a natural bid through the ETFs that none of these other tokens have. The gold story will, I think, translate at some point. The other tokens don't have that. Ether, like we said, not really its cycle. Solana has had a great run already, like an insane run. So hard to see it, absent any real new things, hard to see it continue to outperform. And then just using random alt L1, it's a good cheap call to the upside of like a major kind of like rally. But in that point, Bitcoin will also run up significantly. And so that's why for me, I think risk adjusted, it's much better to just hold kind of like Bitcoin and sleep easy and let the boomers kind of just bid up your bags.
Yeah, I agree. I just feel like I'm debating whether to do like a little bit of even levered Bitcoin, like have normal Bitcoin and then have like a slice of DGen like levered Bitcoin, or have Sui, because I feel as though I like those two as the best risk reward. But to be honest, I just feel like Bitcoin is the best trade. Like I don't think without major adoption, which I feel like we're not going to have until the end of this year, for example, or maybe even a few months after that as well, just by the way that this cycle's already gone. I think it just really becomes a Bitcoin trade. Like it becomes a waterfall of what people buy if Bitcoin goes to 100K, rather than tons of users coming on and trading meme coins. Like what would you want to trade? So yeah, I'm kind of going back and forth. I think BNB could be a good trade too. CZ's coming out of jail.
That could be a good trade.
They've turned it round. There's a meme coin on there which I think could go to $1 billion, which is Simon's Cat. There's a few different things on that chain where I'm like, I think they see a large amount of users, nowhere near the size of Solana, but Binance has kind of come through the woods here, and I just feel as though that might not be a terrible one. But
it's a good one, actually. I like it. I think I'd rather own that than like one of the other alt L1s. The other alt L1s too, they have like all these weird unlock schedules, and there's a lot of like backroom dealing. And people like to pretend that everything's clean and clear. It's not, folks. Like there's a lot of stuff that nobody knows. And so I'd rather have something that's out there, it's Lindy in that sense, and not worry about the drawdowns. If I'm gonna ride drawdowns, I'll rather ride them with meme coins. Like, I don't feel so bad when like Mog or Pepe goes down 40% because fuck, it's a meme coin. Yeah. Right. Whereas if my alt L1 is down the only alt L1 that I have, and I never should, but it's near.
That had a good week.
I bought a bag of that in December and January. I threw it into one of my old Fireblocks wallets. I haven't touched it. I don't plan on touching it. That's like my call option trade. And that's just because we had a couple of calls with like gigabrains in AI, and they were all talking about near. I don't get it. I use AI for really stupid things. They all said it's the future. I did that, and that's my one L1 trade. But I can't pitch it to you because I actually don't know. It's just one of those things where like, this feels good. I'm gonna set it and forget it. Yeah,
I think Near and Sui are both seen as like easier to write and read by AI, for example. Like I think the programming language that's used by Sui in particular is meant to be easier. But like we're not actually at that use case either yet. So it feels kind of you're buying it beforehand. I think that's an interesting point you just put, because like Sui, for example, has big unlocks. All these other coins have big unlocks. Maybe we should just go into that a little bit. OTC trading is such a crazy thing as well. Like the OTC streets at the moment, which I'm in chats of, like there are huge amounts of supply with people people have had a really bad cycle, and a lot of these teams, a lot of these early investors are just trying to get out of tokens. Maybe we should explain what that is. Like it's the OTC market essentially is just anyone who's got anything tied up in one of these investments for VC, they basically go to one of these OTC brokers and they sell them. Quite a lot of them work with Fireblocks, right? Fireblocks, I think, integrates with a bunch of different OTC firms, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah, so it's just like P2P, but behind the scenes, you can't see it on chain because it's locked tokens, so you're just signing contracts over. And then folks can go and hedge those, because if you assume the position, you might not be held to the same kind of restrictions. And it's a whole different world. I'm not personally involved in it, don't have the capital to be like doing OTC trades, but yeah, it's especially for these types of coins that raised a lot of money at high valuations. They have funds that are probably trying to raise their second funds. You have to show some sort of like returns or some sort of liquidity. Yeah, the only OTC stuff that I follow is Punk's OTC. I think that's one of the best market makers I've ever witnessed in my 15 years in markets. But
that's proper OTC. This is kind of something I just think people should be aware of. Like, when you hear about stuff being locked up for a while, it's often not really locked up. Often the trade has already happened months, maybe even years ago, and it's been sold to somebody else in one of these OTC markets, and often at a massive discount. Like the discounts for some of these, you kind of saw when the Solana piece traded, right, from the FTX estate, like you're talking about discounts of 40 to 50%. So if you're sitting there on an L1 trade and you're like, oh, the unlocks don't start for another 2 years, they've already started. Don't worry about it. Like, always be aware that the unlock schedule is not really what the unlock schedule is. Like, these teams, these investors are often getting out at large discounts to you already, and then, like you said, they often get hedged with futures trading or something like that, a perp or something like that. I think it's it's something that maybe just people aren't aware of, but it's very, very active in crypto. And I know this year, just because given the performance of a lot of different VC funds, a lot of different liquid funds, particularly those in alts, that market is, the discounts you're seeing on some of those pieces are absolutely insane. I thought one interesting piece of news this week, and obviously you're in the custody space, is Bitcoin, wrapped Bitcoin, which is now moving to Coinbase. I don't know if you saw this week. So there was some FUD a few weeks ago that wrapped BTC, the WBTC ticker, was moving its custodian out of the US and into Asia. And part of that custodian was going to be linked to Justin Sun and the Tron network. And that caused a lot of FUD. And you saw a number of different DeFi protocols say they were going to try and move away from wrapped Bitcoin, which had kind of a monopoly on wrapped Bitcoin on the ETH chain, at least, and even on Solana. And Coinbase came out this week with its CB BTC ticker, where they're going to be wrapping Bitcoin on Base. It looks like to start. I think it only happened yesterday. It's already up to, I think, nearly about $200 million market cap. This is kind of one of the big last frontiers of crypto, Bitcoin DeFi. Like, no one's really been able to crack it. It's never really become that big. Maybe part of that was because no one really trusts wrapped Bitcoin. Maybe Coinbase is the future of this. Do you think this was a big deal? It did seem to cause a lot of debate in the crypto space.
Yeah, so I think it's unfortunate that WBTC, obviously the team that handled that kind of pretty much offloaded the product to a consortium that includes Justin Sun. The reality is it's not a very good revenue generator for them, and so that's why I think they sold it, or they look for a new partner. Right? You look at Tether, right? It's printing money for the folks that have it, right? I mean, that created it and that maintain it, and it wasn't the case with WBTC. Unfortunately, to your point, right, it was the largest used wrapper of Bitcoin on EVM DeFi, and people just don't really trust Justin Sun. And now Coinbase is offering a new version. I think the issue with this version is that obviously Coinbase is subject to US rules and regulations, and it so becomes like USDC, where there is a way to freeze your coins, there's a way to blacklist your wallet. And so we really start getting into a more existential question of Bitcoin DeFi. Like, do we have really like sovereignty if you're using a product that's wrapped by a US public listed company? And so that's one. The second part is, how do you like DeFi for Bitcoin is really just borrowing and lending against it. I don't think there's been anything major besides that, and it's good enough, right? If you have a bag of Bitcoin, you don't want to sell it, you can always just borrow against it. Almost acts like a put option, and then you can definitely obviously use that money for whatever you need. But other than that, like I've not. I think the asset is so volatile itself that it's really hard to build a healthy suite of products that could, more closely look like something that we have in the traditional system. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think just obviously the WBTC thing to Coinbase BTC thing is, I do think it's gonna be like a third party that does this in a WBTC way, or maybe with smart contracts without having to rely on either a Justin Sun or a Coinbase, which while they're a great company and we love them, they still, you never know what happens. Elizabeth Warren comes in and says, "Hey, freeze those people like CB, BTC," and then you're completely out of luck.
Yeah, look, that's what he clapped back with. Justin Sun, which you've basically said as well. Like, I think that was a very fair point. Like, yeah, it's moved out of the US, it's moved to Asia, and Justin Sun's kind of an infamous figure just because of his dealings always seem on the edge of legality, let's say, and often his protocols are not like properly collateralized in the right way. And there's been a lot of questions about HGX, but I don't know if like this means you run into Coinbase Bitcoin. I do think Bitcoin's use case obviously is more of it's a collateral asset, right? That's all it really is for some of these DeFi protocols. People can borrow and lend against it, and then you can use it maybe for like perp trading, or can use it in DeFi pairs. It just never really been able to be cracked, and the main reason is because people just don't trust the wrap. I think there has been attempts which are starting to gain traction. I think Babylon is the main like native Bitcoin yield platform. Well, let's say protocol that's starting to launch. And I think there was a Pendle. There is a Pendle yield farm this week which launched, which has like 45% yield on Bitcoin. Because I think there's an ETH L2 which is using that Babylon protocol to like make Bitcoin the gas fee or something like that. There's definitely some more native Bitcoin DeFi which is hopefully starting to come through. But although I'm kind of not that bullish on Justin Sun, I think he has a fair point. I don't feel like this like solves the issue here for most Bitcoin holders. I think that will be a bit more competitive. Like maybe CB BTC goes to like 2 to 3 billion and starts to maybe challenge. I think it's like 9 or 10 billion what REKT BTC is at the moment. So maybe it starts to challenge it a little bit. But I think Bitcoin DeFi I think has to happen on Bitcoin. Bitcoin maxis just don't want to touch it. Like it's literally like they've got it locked in a safe in their house. It's like disaster recovery style. They do not want to touch this thing until the last possible minute. So the only chance I think Bitcoin DeFi will work at scale is kind of on Bitcoin itself.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And then maybe we'll leave with we'll end at least this section, at least with one of the more interesting topics this week, which is that the Trump DeFi project does seem to be launching. It seems to be launching next week. World Liberty Finance. This is from Trump, but I think most notably from the Trump family themselves. I don't know if Trump, as in Donald Trump himself, is kind of just the face of it. I don't think he's been involved in the DeFi coding of this by any means. I think it's Eric Trump and Trump Jr., which have been the main proponents of it. And I think Barron may be involved as well. But that's going to be announced on Monday. Do you have any news about this? Like, do you have any views? It's going to change the world?
So hard to talk about the Trumps without it turning political. I obviously vehemently disagree with their morals and a lot of their politics, especially being an immigrant. But it is interesting, and gotta give them credit for really doubling, tripling down on something that's done so well for them as far as being able to fundraise. Obviously, the Trump NFTs were a success. Then just seeing how they can just corner this size or this population of, one issue voters, one issue crypto voters. And this is a really good way of saying, remember when NFTs, when celebrities would come in and we're like, well, are you really here to be part of the ecosystem, or are you here to extract? If you're here, then go buy some NFTs or go do a spaces or whatever. And like whoever's advising this family is obviously giving them the right advice when it comes to how to look like you're part of the ecosystem. And I give them, they're very, very good political operators, and I give them a lot of credit for launching something. Now, what's going to happen? I have no clue. I personally will stay as far away as possible from this. But I'll definitely be watching. Obviously, a couple of our personal friends are going to be part of the launch announcement, so definitely gonna be watching. But it's just not for me, unless it's like something really innovative, which I don't see how Eric Trump or Donald Trump Jr. have this new like DeFi thing that's going to be innovative that nobody else has been able to launch before. It's probably just going to be some like, again, Aave fork, you deposit some coins and or like earn that new World Financial Liberty coin they're going to do. And yeah, I mean, nothing we didn't see back in like 20 and 21.
I mean, I obviously, I'm more pro Trump just because I wanted to come in, and he's been so pro crypto versus the current administration. So like, I think if he gets in, it's a very, very bullish scenario for crypto. At the same time, as someone who thinks he's done well so far, this seems like a massive risk to me. I don't know if like, taking all the politics aside from it, he's already got the crypto vote. He doesn't need to do a DeFi project.
This is for money, right?
Does he need that much? Like, I mean, how much do you think he raises from this? Do you think he can't just go out and just dump the token, right?
50, 100 million. I mean, that is an insane. Also, it wouldn't be for the campaign; it'll be for them. And the guy's he's got what, like 30 different lawsuits and stuff he's battling, and again, not to get political, but he is going through a lot of expenses when he's defending himself from those things. And if they don't win the presidency again, like it would be a nice chunk of change to get started on whatever the next stage is. So yeah, I mean, it's a celebrity launch. It just so happens to be a former president of the United States and a current, candidate for the presidency, which is just really, really interesting. And I would have never had this on my bingo card. But it's from a crypto native side, it's really cool to see. I'll leave it.
I don't think many people predicted it. I think there was a Polymarket line, which was, will Trump launch a coin before the election? It was like 10 to 20% before this week, and it's jumped up to 90%. So crazy times. Anyway, we'll go into the left curve corner, and then we'll get some questions right at the end. You haven't been here for left curve corner, but we go through the major topics in the left curve part of the space. We will begin with the Ape Heist. There was a very famous Ape Heist this week, probably one of the biggest heists in crypto we've ever seen. An ape CryptoPunk sold for 10 ETH. Now that's probably around $1.5 to $2 million less than what it's really worth. It actually happened via a defunct NFT platform called Niftex. The buyer was able to put in a lowball bid into the platform, which was spotted, but unluckily was not stopped. And as a result, it sold for 10 ETH. It's already got a 600 ETH plus bid on it. One of the most crazy stories I've seen in NFTs for a long time. Secondly, Sundog. We spoke about Justin Stun earlier in this show. His main meme coin, obviously named after him as well, that has reached an all-time high of 345 million yesterday. It's obviously leading Tron meme coins, which has been a bit of a theme, I think, of the last month or two. It's got a Binance listing. It got a Bybit spot listing this week as well. There was a massive buy which went in yesterday of $2 million on Binance, which actually wicked it all the way up to over $1 billion. Fill the wick. Will be interesting to see how that thing goes over the next few weeks. Thirdly, XCopy. XCopy continues to absolutely dominate what is generally still quite a quiet crypto art market. You saw Grifters, which is one of his collections, go up 30%. Max Payne, which is his open edition, up 70%. And you saw a one-of-one edition sell for around $650,000 and a one-of-10 edition sell for over $500,000. So huge sales going through on XCopy. It hasn't yet translated into the rest of the crypto art market, but it's good to see nonetheless. Number 4, we've had casino tokens being back in vogue. So we started to see DeFi tokens come back in vogue. We've also seen casino tokens. These were tokens which were kind of a big deal 18 months ago. A lot of talk about the buyback and burn on these sort of tokens. RLB is probably the biggest. It's up around 100% over the last 2 weeks alone. It's burnt 50% of its token already through buyback and burn, and it's burning around 10% a year at the moment, but a big move back into that sector. And then finally, AI coins. So we spoke about all the different sectors which have been hot. Meme coins have been less hot over the last 2 weeks. AI coins have probably been the hottest sector. You had things like FET, NEAR, Tau, all amongst the biggest gainers over the last 2 weeks. That was on the back of Nvidia's results, which were a little bit mixed, but then there's been some more positive sentiment over the last week or so, which pushed them back up higher. I don't know if you want to talk about any of those, Sergito. Maybe we'll talk about the Ape Heist. Because you're kind of
heist. You know what? It's a shame for the people that own fractions or shares in this thing, right? It is a shame. But it's also one of those things where the buyer didn't steal it in like a actual, he didn't take anything that wasn't allowed. He put in a bid or she put in a bid, right? And the market has some frictions given that the front end for that protocol is dead and nobody could stop it. I think G Money, who's one of the largest holders of the shards, tried to stop it. He missed like 2 zeros on the way they had to put in, so he missed it by like a fraction of a penny. But at the end of the day, it's fair game, well played. You read the rules, you submit. It's not the first bid that goes into this ape over the last year and a half that it's been sitting there in that vault, and they finally were able to fish it out. So yeah, heist, I think in the more kind of like colloquial side, like free is stolen, yes. But I think, and this actually, in the Punk's Telegram, it was a lot of discussion over the last couple of days.
Yeah, Punk's OTC, who you shouted out earlier, he really thinks it's a heist.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when somebody picks up $2 million off the street for $10, or it was $25 or $25,000, everybody else in the market wishes it was them. And it does suck for the holders, and things should be better, but it's not like it was a rug. It's not like an oracle got manipulated to kind of like take money out of a protocol or anything like that. The rules were very clear. Everybody that bought shards knew the rules. This is a story that within the Punk market has been really just, everybody knows about that ape. It had been sitting there for 3 years, and so yeah, I mean, nothing they can do now. I'm just surprised I haven't bid. Like I would have taken the 600 ether and rode off into. You can't really ride off into the bid, but you can definitely go have yourself a nice month out in, like, I don't know, it's the fall, Aspen or something like that.
I would have definitely taken that bid, 100%. But yeah, maybe we'll go into a little bit more of the smaller details around this, which made it even more crazy. Was the front end of the site is down, so no one was really able to see that this bid had gone through unless you were looking at the smart contract itself. There was no notification to anyone who owned the shares. Like, this NFT had been fractionalized, and one of the people who owned one of those fractions put in a bid basically to take over the whole thing. And it was identified that this has happened just a few hours before that bid was meant to end. You had 2 weeks to identify it. And then in the final hours, G Money, who's a very well-known collector in the space, identified that bid had been put in and moved to put in a competing bid. But he moved to put in the competing bid at the minimum possible increase possible. And actually, his calculation seems to have been off by about 1 trillionth of an ETH. He missed the bid by something absolutely insane. So like, that also makes me feel like it's not a heist, because people were aware of it. They just miscalculated the competing.
It's not the first time somebody lowballs this ape. It's been many times. They finally got away with it, and so yeah, it's like they found free money in the street, but fair and square in that sense. They played by the rules.
Yeah.
Rules and everything else, yeah, but they played by the rules.
Yeah, G Money also actually said, this is fair game. Fair game. Although Punk's OTC, I think, owns different shares, was like, no. I kind of sit in the middle. If you don't have a front end and you're not telling anyone that the bids have gone through, is there a responsibility for you to continue that at all times? It's difficult to say. What I would say is, if I owned that many shares, I'd be checking this thing every single week.
You would have written a script or a bot to make sure that every single time somebody interacts with that smart contract, I get pinged. I agree with you. a lot of complacency there from the holders, and just also like you bought into a multi-million-dollar asset in a fractional way through like a startup back in 21. Like this was bound to happen. Like you should have done the risks. But yeah, good for the buyer. I hope they do something cool with the Ape, or if not, I've put in a 12 Ether bid on the Ape, and if they want to take it and make 2 Ether, it's a quick 20% return in a week. Please do. I'll be happy to hold that Ape for you guys.
All right, we'll get into the questions now. Just before that, we're gonna flag some of the pro crypto content on Real Vision. Earlier this week, we had Ash Beddington again, did a deep dive into the developments on Solana. He has spoken to Matty Taylor from Colosseum, Tristan Freezer from Zeta Markets. That conversation is available for pro crypto subscribers. As we said at the start of the show, you can use BDay10 to get discounts on Real Vision membership at the moment. All right, going into the questions from the live audience, we've had any thoughts on Grayscale starting a Ripple fund, XRP? You have any thoughts on this? This launched this week.
I mean, it's just part of their product suite, right? They're continuing to roll out funds based on the largest market cap coins. And so it totally makes sense that they do this. I think it's great. I think Grayscale has a great team. They've done a lot of really good stuff for the ecosystem. So congrats to them, and just really wishing them a lot of success, because it'll be good for all of us. But I wouldn't read too much into it. It's just saying, Ford Motors making a pickup truck. Okay. Like that's what they do.
There's been a lot of questions about XRP because obviously it still hasn't, I think there's still an appeal pending potentially on the ruling versus the SEC about whether it's security or not. But a lot of people have said, XRP has probably got a good case to be made for the next potential ETF. I mean, the ETF hasn't already been performing that well. So I don't know if people will be rushing in to do an XRP ETF, but there's some questions about it. And Grayscale did an XRP trust. Interestingly, their next one seemingly is going to be SUI too. I think they're taking institutional inflows for a SUI trust as well. So it feels like Grayscale are probably going to do this for a range of different assets. They've already done Solana. Now they've done XRP. They're going to do SUI. But yeah, it's good to see this. It's good to see the rails being built, I agree, for various different altcoins. Secondly, we have any thoughts on trading out of some of my SOL for SUI? I guess we kind of did touch upon that. Like, what do you think, Sergio?
I would consider your personal tax situation, right? If you're sitting on a massive gain and it's a short-term capital gains here in the States, I just wouldn't incur that to go into something that might slightly outperform. But if taxes are not a concern in that sense, I don't know. I think putting a small percentage into treating it as a call option could make sense. Or just taking a larger percentage of your Solana off the table if you had a good run on that trade, and turning up a small percentage of that into kind of like the next leg Alto one trade to continue to have exposure. I think all these things are going to move together. I mean, they move together over the medium to long term. So yeah, depending on like what you're trying to do, right? If you're trying to just make quick money in a week or two, it seems like they've ran already. So maybe you missed that one off for now. If it's just more portfolio rebalancing, thinking long term, then yeah, if you want to have exposure to something, definitely have exposure to something. But if you're selling another asset, especially one that's up so much, yeah, make sure you think of your tax considerations, because a lot of people got wrecked back in April of 22 filing taxes for stuff that we did in 21 without really thinking about it too much.
I think that's a very good point. Be aware of your taxes. I think a lot of people will be sitting on unrealized gains in Solana. I do think that what I said was, I kind of would just echo that again. Like, I think that SUI could outperform Solana, but I also don't think that's because there's high amounts of adoption. So if Bitcoin doesn't go up to 100K, it breaks down, or we don't have this crazy next 6 to 12 months, I think that SUI's, it's still a little bit of a difficult trade. You might be waiting there in 6 to 12 months, and there also isn't adoption there. Whereas Solana is seeing adoption. As we said at the start of the show, the trade is there. Like, it still has the highest number of active addresses ever for any blockchain this week. There's clearly users of Solana, but we just think because of meme coins being less active, DeFi volumes going down a little bit, and the unlocks, that trade becomes a little bit more, I don't know, it's easier to FUD, I would say. I don't know if I love SUI more than I'm a bit more wary on Solana, but I do think that my if I was to pick a barbell right now, it'd be Bitcoin and probably a small amount of SUI or levered Bitcoin, like I said earlier in the show. All right, let me go to the next one. What, if any, indicators will you be watching to gauge a to gauge a meme coin cycle top, e.g., Doge hitting 100 billion? Yeah, I mean, Doge hitting 100 billion would be a 6x from here. That would probably set off a few top signals in my brain. I personally think that we've kind of touched upon it a little bit. The meme coins are going through a bit of a PvP moment here. I do think that one of the best use cases of crypto, having been here for 3 or 4 years, is financialization of internet culture. Whether that's NFTs or meme coins, like people do like to trade memes. They like to trade communities based on those memes. And I think crypto is the perfect place to trade internet culture. But right now, for the last 3-4 months, there hasn't really been that much new money coming in. So I don't know if, like, long term, I do think that, you know, if crypto market cap continues to go higher, meme coin market cap will continue to go higher as well. But I think we've probably seen a little bit of a mini top in the meme coin market cap, if I'm honest, already.
I'll tell you my indicators. When you start seeing people doing really stupid stuff on Twitter because they made money in a meme coin, a lot of people, not just the 1 or 2 early guys, but like a lot of people start doing, and you'll see it. You'll just see it when you're like, okay, that's a top indicator. Or just wild stories. I remember back in 21, a Goldman MD retired, literally came in the next day and retired because he had made a ton of money on Dodge. And that was near the Dodge top. Like, that's the kind of stuff you don't hear about every year, let alone, you know, for people like that. And so for me, it's those kinds of stories, given that meme coins are so about narrative. I think your indicators don't come from charts or anything else. They actually come from the narratives themselves.
Okay, and then final one we're going to do is, could stablecoins be used as an exit from the dollar, allowing the government to print even more, even faster? I don't know if I follow what that means, but I do think there was a report out this week, actually, I think by PayPal or one of the, maybe it was by Visa, by one of the major payment providers, talking about how the dollar strength or the that stable coins were going to be the next big thing for the dollar. That suddenly so many different economies around the world could move into the dollar very, very quickly, and dollar power would go up as a result of this. I think that's kind of obvious. It's been really surprising to me that the US has kind of not been so pro crypto, because to me, I feel like it's just a massive rails for the dollar to go global.
Coming from Latin America and knowing how much of a good thing and then a bad thing dollarization was for local economies, yeah, it's an incredible tool that the US could flex if they wanted to. To your point, they're not really thinking too much about it. But yeah, I mean, I think the question was more like, could the government print stable coins instead of printing money? And that might just miss how stable coins work, which usually, you know, they're backed by treasury bills somewhere. So, you know, not really a possibility unless the government was like, yeah, we're going to start. I mean, the government prints money just by literally hitting a button on a keyboard, right? They don't really have to like print any paper. But when it comes to stable coins, yeah, you're just exporting policy as people around the world use the dollar instead. And I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens in 5-10 years. So I do think the stable coin supply chart is going to be up only forever. It's just as more people come on chain, it's just you expect them to obviously get. So I think that's going to be a good story. At some point, it's going to no longer be part of like a bullish narrative because it's just natural growth of the asset. But something to definitely keep an eye on for, especially when it comes to policy.
All right, I agree with all of that. I think I do think that you can't really print stable coins out of thin air. Like the dollars have to be held at a bank somewhere, and they're almost always they're used to buy like treasuries, particularly like USDC has to be 1-to-1 backed. So I think it's just dollar power, but I'm not sure if you can like print out of print.
You have like a TUSD.
Thin air. Oh yeah,
Terra,
TUSD. There's been some dodgy.
You
coins.
could just launch tokens and say these are coins and they're worth a buck. Well, the
That's
market
what Justin Sun would do.
Yeah.
That's what Justin Sun would do. All right. Well, that was REKT Vision. Thank you so much again for coming this week, Sergio. Yeah, it looks like we are still flirting with going above 60K, which would be a welcome change to what's normally a horrific episode of REKT Vision every single week. I think you can find Sergio, as always, on X, Sergito Silva. Sergito.
Yeah.
You can find him on X. He's a very, very famous punk PFP. Remember, again, Real Vision's birthday this month. You can go onto the website and use BDay10 to get a discount on membership. You can find me on X at REKTMando or mandominutes.com for my newsletter. We will see you again next Friday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. British summertime. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and thanks again, Sergio.
Thank you for having me. Good weekend, everybody.